Good morning, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Stone, and this is your lesson for today. We're going to be talking about suspense, and we've uh, talked yesterday in great detail about word reference, and that's going to come in during our suspense section. But before we get started, you're going to need 26, 27, and 28 out of your writing section of your binder, and you're also going to need your red and your blue colored pencils. So let's take a look at what suspense is. Now, we've talked about suspense before, and for you new students, uh, they've been introduced to this before, but we're going to review it. So you shouldn't be lost. You should fit right in. But suspense can be presented in your paper in three different ways. And those three different ways are story questions, word reference, or something called the magic of three. Now, we're not going to talk about the magic of three today. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. So today we're just talking about story questions and word reference. Now, let's first talk about story questions. Story questions can be raised directly or indirectly. The simplest way directly is to have your main character raise a question to wonder or worry. In turn, the reader wonders and worries as well. The indirect approach involves telling the reader only part of what is going on, just a hint. This raises questions in the reader's mind and compels them to read on. Okay, before we go any farther, I want to make sure you understand that suspense does not have to be scary. And that's kind of like that with the last part of that reminds me of, like, you give them hints. If you're getting a gift and I'm giving you hints along the way, that's really not going to be scary. That's more suspenseful, okay? Creating anticipation. So just remember that suspense and suspense in your story does not need to be scary. All right, so let's talk about story questions. In your paper, all right, your main character, which is Humphrey, is going to be required if you use story questions, you have to at least ask two questions. And a lot of people have asked me if they have to be in quotation marks. Well, when you do a story question, your main character is wondering something, thinking something. And so if they are wondering or thinking something, then that does not need to be in quotation marks. If they were to speak it and say it out loud, then that has to go into quotation marks. And remember, your quotations are very limited in this paper. You can only use 1 to 3 of them. 1, 2, or 3 dialogue sentences. And so this may not be one place where you want to use it, because if Humphrey can think it or wonder it and you're going to use story questions, you don't have to put it in quotation marks. So let's look at an example. It says, Catherine couldn't believe her eyes. What in the world did Grandma have in that huge wrap package? Okay, first of all, that's creating suspense, but it's not scary suspense. It's anticipation. All right, it's excitement. And I want you to also notice that if you're going to use story questions in your paper, this sentence does not meet the requirement because there's only one question. So if this was going to meet the requirements of your paper, then you might say, Catherine couldn't believe her eyes. What in the world did Grandma have in that huge wrap package? I wonder if it's the bike I've always been thinking of. Okay, or could it be the bike I've always been dreaming of? So that would meet the requirements of your paper. And so you notice that story question, Catherine and the reader wonder what's inside and if it's going to be a gift for Catherine. All right, the second way, and we talked at great length about this yesterday, was word reference. And word reference, if you're going to use it in other parts of your paper, a lot of times you don't recognize that you need word reference until you get to the editing and the revising stage of your paper. And so you notice that you're saying the same thing over and over again. In that case, you use word reference to make the sentences more interesting and you're not saying everything over and over and over again. When we use it in suspense, word reference is going to be used to build up to the suspense, to the main event. And so you're not going to come right out and say what it is. All right. And we're going to talk a lot about that more tomorrow when we talk about the magic of three. because my example that I used in writing uses word reference and the magic of three. But word reference, let's look at an example that they've given you. It says it teases the reader by not immediately revealing what it is. Describe a story critical character or object without naming it. Use word reference instead. So if I'm going, if Humphrey meets a giraffe, okay, I'm not going to come out and say Humphrey met a giraffe. Okay, I might say Humphrey saw in the distance a long-necked, legged, brown and yellow speckled beast or something like that. But I didn't come right out and tell you it was a giraffe. I led you into it. So let's look at an example that they gave you. It says instead of writing, I saw a dragon in the cave, use word reference. The creature was huge and dark as night. It made a soft rumbling sound. I could feel the mythical beast's hot breath on my face. Okay, nowhere in there did it say dragon. What you would want to do in order to build suspense is that you would reveal that it was a dragon at the end of that, okay? So if Humphrey was meeting a dragon, okay, you could say the creature was huge and dark as night. It made a soft rumbling sound. I could feel the mythical beast's hot breath on my face, okay? And say something like, but it turned out to be a friendly dragon or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, so that's what word reference are. You're not going to tell me what it is immediately. You're going to leave me into it. And so in this sentence, you are always wondering, what is it? Okay, the reader is dying to know. And you're leading me into your main event where if Humphrey was meeting a dragon, okay, then Humphrey's adventure is going to do something with the dragon. So now you've introduced the dragon and you're leading me into the main event. All right. So remember, it does not need to be scary. Humphrey can be meeting a friendly dragon. It does not have to be scary. So let's take a look at, I think, page 27. Okay. I know what this is. This is another example that they gave you that, was something good. It wasn't something scary. That's what that is. I couldn't figure out what in the world that was. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to page 27. All right, this is where your blue and your red colored pencils are going to come in. All right, so let me read this to you. It says, Darren climbed the steps to the attic. He knew his birthday presents were all hidden up there. Excitement tingled his skin. He peered into the dim, cluttered space and tiptoed across the creaky old floor to the storage closet in the corner. Slowly, quietly, he opened the door. Suddenly, there was a noise on the stairs. Would he be caught snooping? All right, in this one, where it says that you need to do word reference in blue and story questions in red. In this one, I think that they kind of written it poorly, because I don't think if I was writing this, I would come right out and tell you that it was an attic. I think I would use the suspense of where you are and stuff along with the story questions. And so I think I would have introduced that it was maybe the attic later, but I didn't write that. So that's the way that they wanted to do it. Okay, let's take a look. So we're describing the attic. So what else can you say describes the attic in that little paragraph? Well, you could also say just there. That's not very descriptive, but it is also telling you about the attic. So I did not say he knew his birthday presents were all hidden up in the attic. I didn't use it over and over again. Now, the next one, I think they did a good job of describing. It is a dim and cluttered space, all right, with a creaky old floor to the storage closet in the corner. Okay, so what you need to do is I want you to take your blue colored pencil. I want you to go through and I want you to highlight those, the things that I've highlighted in blue. I want you to highlight them in blue because that's how I'm going to know you did this lesson with me. So slowly, quietly, he opened the door. Suddenly there was a noise on the stairs. Would he be caught snooping? All right. So let's talk about the story question. This one's pretty obvious, and it's pretty obvious to find the story questions because it usually ends, and it will end with a question mark. So in this case, you need to take your red colored pencil and highlight the story question. Now, if you were writing this in your paper, remember that would not fit the requirement as far as story questions because you have to have 2 of them. All right, let's look at the next example that they've given you. This is an example of not coming right out and saying what it is. This is building the suspense, okay, as far as what this gift is going to be. And if you notice, it's not scary, okay, it's anticipation. And so there's not a whole lot of blue, okay, that we're going to be highlighting in this because it's kind of building it up and telling you steps of how to get there. Now, you are going to have 2 questions that you'll be highlighting in red. So let's take a look at this. It said, Ben held the small gift wrapped box in his hand for a minute. Okay, so that's what they're talking about. They're talking about this gift, this box, this small gift wrapped box. Okay. The box was so light that he thought it might be empty. What could it be? He thought. Okay, question mark, hint, there's a story question. So that's going to be highlighted in red. He looked at his parents, grinning from ear to ear, and his heart began to race. He tore the red bow away from the paper and ripped open the box. Okay, I didn't go through and highlight every time they used the word box. I think, personally, that they shouldn't have used the word box over and over and over again. I think they should have replaced it with something else. It says he shuffled through the paper and all that he found was more paper. He looked at his parents in disbelief, but they were still smiling. Dad pointed to the box and then picked it up. A tiny string tied the bow held at the key. What do I need with the key? He wondered. Question mark. So you're going to take your red colored pencil and you're going to highlight that sentence because that's another story question. Now, this paragraph would meet the requirements for your paper. There's 2 questions. Does there have to be this much stuff writing in between? No, you can ask them immediately one after the other if you want to. I tend to think that I like a little bit of description in between it, but you at least have to have 2 questions. It says Mom and Dad stood up and let him out the door. There on the lawn, wrapped with an extra large bow, was the most amazing motorbike he'd ever seen. Okay, so this created suspense by not telling you what it was at the very beginning. It told you that it was a small gift wrap box. Well, then they threw you this curve and you get to the end and it turns out to be a motorbike. So that's building suspense with word reference, okay, and they also used story questions. So I want you today, okay, and like I said, the magic of 3 is at the bottom of that, but we're not going to do that. So what I want you to do today is I want you to look at number 3 on page 27, and I want you to see if you can do that by yourself, all right? And I'm going to check these when you turn it in on Friday. So your assignment for today, listen very carefully because if you don't have this, I know one of 2 things. You turned me off early or you didn't even do the lesson. So I'm going to know that. So on page 27, I want you to do 3 by yourself. And then on page 28, you're going to be basically doing sort of the same thing. You don't have to do all of those parts. So the one that I want you to find is you're going to underline story questions in red and you're going to underline the use of word reference in blue. So you're going to do red and blue again. You're going to do those 2 little paragraphs just like we just did on page 27. So you have 3 little paragraphs that I want you to work on underlining in red and blue. And so when you get finished with that, you're going to take 26, 27, and 28 out of your writing section, staple it, name, number, and put it in your doc folder. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you on Friday.